I'm so excited to be here today on the Heroine's Journey podcast. I didn't think doing a podcast would be all that much fun, but it is one of the most fun things I do. And it's because it brings me to great people to have great conversations and get feedback from you all who are listening to us. So, truly, this is one of the joys of my life. I love it that our stories, the heroine's journey we were just saying, is a plot line, and our stories are all different. So understanding how that plot line runs through our lives and yet the different stories. I have with me today Angela McGoldrick, and her story is awesome. Like, awesome, what I mean by awesome is some of us are really hard nuts to crack. And some of us hit the heroine's journey like it just had to blow us apart. I was one of them. When the upset and challenges and difficulties in my life came along, they were not mild, much as I wish they would have been. And much as, when you go through them, you're like, okay, could it just be easier? But sometimes, in order to do what the heroine's journey needs to do in your life, it has to be rough. So that's all to say that Angela has an amazing story that she's going to talk to us about. She's also the author of a book. She's going to tell you about that. And let's just dive right in. Welcome to the Heroine's Journey podcast, Angela.
All right, Joan, thank you very much for having me. It's Anjalia McGoldrick. My name was Angela, and when I began my journey, which was a deep healing journey, I found that spiritual awakening, and I decided to change my name to Anjalia. And so it is Anjalia McGoldrick. So it's very, very good to be here with you tonight. I'm so
I'm
excited.
glad you clarified that too. And Angelia is so pretty. Where did you come up with that?
Well, Jonah, I had met with I went to Yogaville and spent some time in an ashram, and one of the swamis there gave me the name Pramanjali, and I just could never get used to it. And one night while I was meditating and going through a deep healing journey at the time, it just came to me that it was Angelia, and I'm like, yes, that's it, and so it feels very fitting for this time in my life. And I feel like I've had several periods of my life, and Angela definitely was a part of my life. She was an overachiever, a workaholic, and she really was, she really helped me through the journey of my life. But I'm definitely in a new phase, and Angelia is the spiritual side of myself. And so
How
it's very
beautiful.
fitting for me.
Yes. We'll start from the beginning because, as I read your bio and the difficulties you went through as a young child and how you're so beautiful and radiant today. I mean, you look like you have the world, in order. So, it's so hard to go through all those difficulties and yet come out. And many people decide they don't want to come out. Many people turn the other way. And, there are all kinds of consequences to it. But obviously, from your radiant glow, you have made lemonade out of lemons.
Wow. Well, thank you, Joan. I appreciate that. And I am excited to share my story because, like you said, in the heroine's journey, it is a plot line. In my book, The Child I Left Behind, A Mother's Journey Toward Healing and Forgiveness, definitely is a healing story. And it touches the heart of each and every reader that embarks upon it and really allows them to look at the mirror within themselves and define those difficulties and struggles that may be different than mine, but actually align with some of the struggles that they went through in their life. And that's really a passion for me, is to help others and to give back and to let them know that no matter where you start in life or no matter the difficulties you've been through, there is always hope for a brighter future. I was catapulted into adulthood when I was only 9 years old when my parents divorced and was in an abusive home with an abusive boyfriend of my mother's. And I got pregnant at 13 years old.
From
I
him.
from a no, I got pregnant from a teen boy I was dating at the time, but it was my way out of that difficult situation. And I was out on my own at 14 as a young mother in an abusive relationship. So right out of an abusive home, continuing the patterns that I had learned, right into an abusive relationship that I only escaped, Joan, with my life when I was 16 years old. And
Wow.
out of desperation and survival, I had to make a very heart-wrenching decision, one that I carried as a scarlet letter on my heart throughout my life, to give my child, to leave my child behind. And, I was out in the world on my own at 16 with no support from my parents. And I had to make the decision if I was going to turn my life around or I was going to continue to struggle.
Uh-huh.
And
And isn't there is that moment of choice in
there,
every heroine's journey. You get to decide, do I fly or do I crash on the rocks below?
absolutely. I think that the struggles and difficulties come into our life, Joan, to give us the opportunity to see what our character is made of. And sometimes, and you talk about this in your book, in The Heroine's Journey, that there's these old beliefs and messages that we pick up along the way. And we sometimes allow those messages to be louder and to be more important than what we know is in our heart. And, I just had some deep inner strength. I had seen so many women in my family and in my life who had succumbed to abusive relationships and struggles and just just gave up and sort of stayed in that victim role.
Mhm.
And I just did not want my life to be like that. I knew there was something more calling me. And I just got busy and I went to work and I studied and got my GED and I created a better life for myself. There were two things that I learned while I was struggling is that the people that were the most successful in life had an education or they owned a business or both. And so I,
Right.
right? And so
That's
I
true.
got, yeah. And so I got busy. I created a cleaning service, which was easy to begin. I also got started going to school and got my education and started creating businesses and I got several degrees along the way and really turned my life around and overcame so many obstacles that many people at my age at 16 may not have ever been able to overcome. But
Talk to us about the practical parts of it. Okay. You're a 16-year-old, you get thrown into the street, you're scared to death, you have no resources to navigate. People can easily take advantage of you. You don't have the tools of adulthood yet. I mean, from that very moment, you found yourself completely on your own. First of all, were you mad? And secondly, like, what what were some of the first things you thought? Did you think, oh God, help me? Or did
Mhm.
you think, I'm just going to die here? Or did you think, oh, great, I'm free of all that abuse and now I get to go for, I mean, where was your head in that moment? Because I think that's part of the difficulty. Our heads get so mixed up in those moments that taking that first step and getting
Mhm.
yourself going onward, you can reflect on the later parts, but what did you do that was so significant? Because that was a hard road.
Yeah, I'd been pretty much on my own. Like I said, I was kind of catapulted into adulthood when I was 9, and pretty much ran my household. I was left with my 4-year-old brother to take care of, and pretty much took care of everything because my mom was at home a lot. She worked an awful lot just to help us survive. And it was in those moments as I was growing up in that abusive home, I just knew it was wrong, and I just didn't want to be there.
Paint,
And
paint a picture for us. Was this rural Virginia?
I grew up I was born in Cincinnati, and then when my parents divorced, we moved to the ghettos of Detroit, which is all my mother could afford. She only had an 8th grade education. We lived in poverty. She was a very proud woman. She worked a lot. She didn't believe, in getting handouts. And so she was gone an awful lot working, and I was left to take care of my younger brother. And it was desperate times. We lived in a pretty rough neighborhood. There was drugs and, violence all around. And, it made me strong, because you had to be.
Uh-huh.
And, I ended up meeting a guy that was 4 years older than me when I was 12 years old. And he was the first person that said he loved me. And I was so desperately looking for someone to love me and support me and to be there for me. And of course, I thought that that was my way out. And it
Uh-huh.
wasn't unusual, Joan, in my family. My parents came from the coal fields of Kentucky, kind of like Loretta Lynn. And so many people, just to get out of poverty, got pregnant and moved on. And my
Uh-huh.
mom was no different. She was 15 years old when she met my dad and got pregnant. And her
Wow.
sisters, all of them did the same. And so it just seemed like a way out for me to get
So
out of
that's
this.
what you knew. You knew that.
I knew that. And, so often we repeat these generational patterns, and I did the very same thing. And, you
So
know,
what
um,
were you thinking in that moment? Did she literally throw you out of the house?
well, 6 months after my daughter was born, she met a new guy and he didn't like me, didn't want to deal with me. And so she gave me $200, a few pieces of furniture, and wished me well. And I had to get an
Oh my God.
apartment. Yeah,
Wow.
so I was pretty much on my, I was on my own,
Uh-huh.
and I moved. Me and my boyfriend got an apartment, and the abuse started right away. And you put up with an awful lot when you're in that survival mode. And of course, I had been beaten down a lot in my life. I didn't have a lot of self-esteem. I was 4 years younger than him, so of course he made me feel like I was beneath him.
Mhm.
And, he had a lot of power and control over me. And I write about that in my book, The Child I Left Behind, the struggles and the difficulties that I went through. But I ultimately was able to escape, but only with my life. And I
Because
love
the thing is early on too, if, love's whatever you knew as a child. So early on for someone to tell you that they loved you, that was like everything,
it
you know,
was everything.
and you think with that comes safety and security. Because how could somebody who says they love you also not keep you in a safe and secure manner? But
Absolutely.
it's not that way at all, we learn. Prince Charming
No.
does not come with his best manners.
Absolutely. And he himself had been all had was wounded. And it's interesting how we attract those kind of people in our life when that's where we're vibrating, right?
Uh-huh, that's
And
right.
so, and then when I escaped that relationship, facing the world, I tried to, get help, but I got turned away. And I just knew it was up to me. And so there for a moment, I felt suicidal. I was very desperate. I didn't know where to turn or what to do. And one day I was driving to work and I saw a little shop that was offering card readings for $5. And I just happened to
Wow.
have $5 in my pocket. And I stopped in and I asked the lady, she said, "Well, what is it that you're looking for today, young lady?" And I said, "Well, I'm just wondering, is anybody ever going to really love me?" And
Oh,
she was an elderly lady. And she said, "Oh, honey," she
oh,
said, "of course you're going to be loved." She said, "What would ever make you believe that you aren't lovable?" And when she finished my reading, she said, "There's a book that you absolutely have to read. It's called Your Erroneous Zones by Dr. Wayne Dyer." And she said, "This will really help you to start changing the beliefs and the thinking and get out of this negative trap that you're stuck in." I went immediately from that shop and bought that book. And for 2 days, I spent reading that book, devouring it. And it absolutely did change the direction
uh,
of my life. It helped me to begin to see that I could change my life and that I had the power within me to do something different. And I just
uh-huh.
got busy and went to work. And just I had this knowing inside of me.
Were you able at that stage to get a job? I mean, how did you take care of just the basics of what you needed? I mean,
Yeah,
where did you go to live and did you get a job? And did anyone talk to you or reach out to be helpful?
no, I was pretty much out there on my own, and no, I didn't have anyone that helped me. I found a job, the only job I could find at the time. We were, I hadn't quite left the relationship, but it was 9 miles from where we lived, and Joe and I walked that 9 miles every day. Worked eight
Wow.
hours as a waitress at 15 years old, and would walk home the 9 miles after working an 8-hour shift. It took me 3 hours. And, during those difficult times of walking those miles, I just knew this was not the life I was going to live. And I didn't
Uh-huh.
know how I was going to get out of it at the time, but I knew I was going to get out of it. And so I just, figured out, like I said, what are the things that make you successful? And I knew that people who owned businesses and had an education, and here I had only finished the eighth grade. I got pregnant in the eighth grade, so I only finished the eighth grade. And I just had sheer determination that I was going to do whatever it took. And I worked an awful lot. I got an apartment. I lied and had to say I was 18. And back then things were different. We didn't have the internet and all of the things we have today. And I got a little apartment, and I worked as a waitress, and I barely made ends meet, but I worked really hard, and overcame an awful lot. Mhm.
Wow. And it's funny how even during those times, things come in to help you. And what I was just thinking was, walking is a form of meditation.
It absolutely
And
was for
so
me.
you had 3 hours of meditation every day
Yeah.
where you could, drop into yourself, hear your inner knowing, get some
Mm,
guidance about what to do next, and really, you know, really have the inner self of you emerge.
absolutely. And I know that through my journey, I became very successful. I was a very hard worker and overachiever, and went on to the University of Michigan and graduated with honors. And I
Wow,
built
congratulations.
well, thank you. And I started, I learned about flipping houses by reading. I read all the time, and I listened to a lot of power thought leaders at the time, including Tony Robbins and Russ Whitney, and a lot of Napoleon Hill, and just really listened to people that had really overcome a lot. And so I was just all the time voracious learner, and I started investing in real estate, and worked really hard and flipped houses, and got my real estate license, and then in my early 30s, I had accumulated, and I'd sit down when I was 20 years old and wrote out a list of all the things that I wanted to accomplish in my life. And I created a vision board, put everything on there.
Mhm.
And through my learning, they said, if you can see it, you and believe it, you can achieve it. And so vision boards were really important to me. And so I clipped all these magazines, things that I wanted, and I achieved all those goals by the time I was in my early 30s. But what I found is that deep inside of me, I had attained all this material things. Financially, I was very successful, but there was still something gnawing at me. And I knew that I wanted to give back. And Wayne Dyer was a psychotherapist, and I always wanted to give back in that way because he had really made a difference in my life. So I went to grad school and got my degree in counseling and human development, and became a therapist and opened a counseling and wellness center. And it's one of the largest and number one counseling centers in all of Southwest Virginia. And I have 18 therapists that work for me, and I've been able to help and give back to others in so many powerful ways. And it's, just a joy. But when I was 50 years old, Joan, I really had a breakdown. I wasn't doing well mentally, emotionally, physically, or spiritually. And I just knew something wasn't right. Here I was still trying to attain financial success, even though I had become financially independent in my 30s. And, I agree with you. It's by turning within and listening, slowing down and being quiet
Mhm.
to really hear that deep wisdom within us. Each and every one of
Because we get to the top of the ladder because we force it, we push it, we're determined. We get to the top of the ladder, and I always say, but the ladder was in the wrong building.
it absolutely was. And you
Yeah.
talk about that in your book. You were very successful as well. And I think that we do that out of our wound. I know for me, I was an overachiever because of my poverty, and that's the thing that drove the bus of my life.
Mhm.
And after I had attained all these things and overcame so much, I found myself at a place where it's like, well, I have all this, but there's still something deep inside of me that isn't
Because
right.
there's a child inside of you, and
That's
that
wounded.
child was hurt early on. And I don't know about you, but the
Absolutely.
child inside of me screamed so loudly sometimes that she overpowers my whole life, the whole situation. And I literally have to talk directly to her and say, it's not then, it's now. You are safe. There is security here. Let's let's calm down here, because you wouldn't be normal, and I'm sure you learn in all your training, you wouldn't be normal if it didn't come that in the middle of your life, that past life was going to show up and say, hey, wait about me. You went on, you achieved, but I'm still back here.
That's right. Well, and I teach this an awful lot about that inner child work because it is really some very important work. If we have this wounded child that's never been tended to, she's gonna show up an awful lot in your life. And what I tell my clients and folks is that if you are triggered in any way, if you're hurting or there's something that comes up, oftentimes what we do is we blame others and project it out onto others, but really that's only our inner child letting us know that they are still wounded in there and they need our attention. And do you know that most people will do anything but slow down and be still and listen to that still voice inside and hear what they're needing? We often cover it up with work. We do it with alcohol, drugs,
All kinds of
material,
stuff.
yeah, material things. But the way to healing, the journey toward healing is within. And by going in and finding that little one that's still needing that love and attention that they never got before,
Uh-huh.
and just being able to slow down and say, oh, honey, it's okay. It's
Mhm.
all right that you're upset. And really listening to that inner child and allowing her to feel, or him, allowing them to feel their feelings. It's
Right.
what we feel that we will heal. And if we keep ignoring it and pushing it down, it's going to come out, and it's going to come out some way, one way or another. And oftentimes
And,
it comes then out in
and
disease.
that's the benefit of the heroine's journey, because the heroine's journey has this big upset that disrupts the adult, everything you've created, everything you've tried to make look nice, everything, all that you've tried to craft in your life so that it looks like perfection. That moment in the heroine's journey of crisis and challenge, and you'll have to tell us what your moment was, because it's very clear to me what mine was.
Mhm.
And it's like a pop quiz, because it's, you wonder, can I do this? Can I get past this? And why is this happening to me? And why is it so painful? And
Mhm.
yet, it's got such a big purpose, because it just unwraps you to the core of the onion. And
Mhm.
now you could get back to really dealing with you and who you are, and that child gets to speak. And I'm not saying it's easy, it's painful right there. It's definitely
Mhm.
painful, but
Absolutely.
grow to be the person that I wanted to become. I couldn't leapfrog that. The heroines
Right.
will not let you leapfrog that. So
No.
you're right in the middle of it, and you're torn apart. So what was that moment for you?
Well, I think I had two of those moments. Definitely when I was 16 years old and thrown out in the world. Those are, like you said, it's your unraveling. But as a matter of fact, it's actually that's the call. That's your call to action. That's your call to your heroine's journey,
Or to
right?
adventure.
Yeah, or to adventure. And it's that moment when it's you have no other choice. It's a
Yeah.
must. And well, and I guess you can not do anything. And there are people that do stay stuck there and they just spiral. But it is definitely when you have a crisis that comes into your life, it's
What
actually
I
an
what
opportunity.
and what I would say, if you're stuck there, that's maximum pain. So
It
if you
is.
like giving yourself maximum pain, then stay right there.
Yeah,
If,
absolutely. Yeah,
if
because
you
you can
want,
stay stuck there forever if you want
I
to.
stayed
And
stuck for a long time. Uh-huh.
you can. But the invitation in those moments is to look within and find that inner strength. We all have a divine light within us that's just calling for us to illuminate that light. So oftentimes, Joan, the light in us gets covered up and it gets dingy and dark because of the circumstances that life serves us. But when we get to that moment and we can just slow down enough to turn within and see that beautiful light that we are, and to listen long enough to hear what it's calling us to, that's when we're able to stand in our truth and create that authenticity, that authentic life that
Authenticity.
matters, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all of these things that I had created, had accumulated in my life, they were beautiful things, traveled all over the world. I had several homes, I had a beautiful house on the lake, a boat, anything that you could imagine materially I had. But I didn't have within me that
Mhm.
peace that I was searching for, that peace that passes all understanding. And
And
it
isn't
wasn't,
that the greatest treasure?
it,
Like
it
I met
that
someone in a yoga class who said to me, I always, she said, I'm good. I can always come home to me. And I looked
absolutely.
at her and I said, I don't know where that is.
Hmm.
That was before I went through the big upset because I was so busy making it look good all around me that I didn't have that juiciness inside of me.
Yeah, it looks real good on paper, and everybody's thinking you have this, perfect life when inside you feel like you're dying inside. And,
Yeah.
it's when, you have those moments. And for me, it happened again when I was 50, I was just not well. And it was a huge moment for me to just say, okay, I
Did
have
something
got to
happen?
stop.
Did
You know
something?
what? I started feeling my health started to go downhill, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, Joan. And I just knew that there was something really, really wrong with me. And I had that call to, I cannot keep doing this. I just couldn't. And so I knew it was time for me to take a look within. And it's been a 5.5 year journey, but I wouldn't trade what I have gone through for anything in this world. I know that every single thing came as an opportunity for me to find myself and for me to heal that little inner child that was so wounded within. And to also discover the generational patterns that were feeding those wounds and to be able to heal them, really heal them, not just cover them up or put a band-aid on them, but to really go within and really listen to what my soul was calling me to. And one of the things I knew without a shadow of a doubt is that I had to write this book, The Child I Left Behind. It was one of the greatest healing journeys, just writing the book,
Mhm.
that I could ever describe, because it absolutely made me look at everything that I had been through, to feel the feelings and the heartache, and to have compassion on that little girl that was just thrown out in the world so young and really didn't have many options. And so I am so grateful for my journey.
Can I ask you a very tender question?
Absolutely.
You mentioned that you left a child behind.
Yes.
So, how did that play out for you? Have you circled back or, have you let her live her own life or, we can't have this interview without asking that question. Sorry.
Absolutely. The book is called The Child I Left Behind. It certainly does lend that question. It was it's an incredible story. And she did come back into my life when she was 12 years old. And she had been abused in her home. And she had been exposed to parental alienation. And if you don't know what that is, it's when one parent demonizes the other parent and turns the child against that parent and makes them feel like that parent didn't love them and that it's not safe to be with that parent. So when she came to me, she had,
I grew up in that family.
yeah. And so my book talks about this very journey and how damaging it is. And,
I
you,
grew up in that family where my father, um, really alienated my mother. And
mhm,
to the point that my mother was so angry and she couldn't be angry at my father, so she would be angry at me.
yeah.
And yeah, so I
It's
know
one of the
that.
most, it is.
I've never heard it named before.
Yeah. Well, I write about it in my book because my journey is very much the story of a child that was significantly abused and not allowed to love me, was whipped if she loved me or if she was anything like me, she was punished. And so she came to me with all of this baggage, and we really worked hard to try to overcome it. But because of my own wounds of shame and guilt and her own wounds of what she had dealt with in my absence. It was a struggle. And, she ended up in foster care. But then she did come back to live with me in her senior year of high school, because while she was in foster care, we were able to build a healthy relationship without her father involved. And, but it was still a tumultuous relationship. And I, it was the biggest wound that I had ever carried in my life. And it's what really hit me when I was 50. It's the thing that didn't ever get resolved. And
Mhm.
so through my healing journey, I was able to recognize the guilt and shame that I was carrying and that I was projecting out onto her. And when I was able to heal my guilt and shame, that mother's wound, that deep scarlet letter that I carried on my heart, I was able to come back. And only recently, Joan, in the last 8 months, my daughter's 42 years old. And, just recently have we been able to begin a conversation that's healthy,
Uh-huh.
because I'm not carrying all of that anymore. And she's beginning to heal on her journey as well. And
Mhm.
so it has been a difficult, heart-wrenching journey, but it's coming full circle. And what a beautiful thing that if her and I can heal, then the generations that come after us will also heal and not carry this wound with
Right.
them.
And I want to put this in context to say that God doesn't waste anything. While you and I will sit back and we will label it, that was terrible, or this was awful, or, I went through blah, blah, blah. And it's all perfect as it is. It's all meant for our soul's growth. I often say I didn't come here for love or money or power. I came here for my soul's growth. Next
Exactly.
time I'm going to say, I don't think I'll ask for so much. Like, can we do this a little softer? But in the meantime, these things have to happen in our lives in order for us to transition the way we need to. And I
Absolutely.
often say too, which has really helped me not carry resentment, I think people are actors in our lives.
Absolutely.
Just when you watch Shakespeare and there's a bad guy, some maybe good guy on the street is playing that bad guy. And I
Hmm.
think that's the way it goes in our lives too. People play roles where they turn out to be mean or terrible or hateful or whatever it is. But I don't really, I look at it like that is their role to play with me so that I get opened up or changed or transitioned in the way that I'm supposed to. I was thinking the other day that I lived in a small town and so much stuff happened and it was like being thrown out of the womb. I left that town, sold the house, blah, 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 blah. And at the time I was so resentful for it and I just didn't want it to happen. But now when I look back on it, that was a really good thing. And there was a plan for me that was bigger than what I could see at the time. So even though you have these stories, and some of us could call it tragic. She went to another family, she was abused, she had a hard journey too,
She absolutely
which
did.
was part of the generational journey. But at the same time, both of you, I'm sure, are blossoming and maturing in ways that if we could just sit on the couch and eat bonbons and chew bubble gum, we would not be forced to do this inner work. And the glory is in being a heroine.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I've always said that everything happens for a reason, and every person comes into our life to teach us something. And, you know, I am so grateful that I have the discernment and, the compassion in my heart that I have, because I have been able to forgive them all.
Uh-huh.
And, forgiveness is one of the greatest gifts that we can give ourselves, because
So
really,
how do you do that? Because
yeah,
there were
so
some people who were really mean in your life. There were some people who tortured you.
yes.
There were some people who you literally thought you were going to die in their presence.
Yeah.
So, and I have this same experience in my own life, something that was just horrible. But I honestly don't carry hatred for that person.
Yeah.
First of all, I know it's not good for me. But more important than that, there's an element of compassion. There's an element
Yeah.
of that person got there because of where they came from.
Yeah.
And they're playing this role in my life that they were supposed to play. So, but you touch on such a tender point, and that is, okay, you get all that, your head gets all that, but then how does your heart deal with it? How do you just sit back and go, thank you for what you did in my life, you know? Um,
Well, that's a great question because it's not easy to forgive when you've been hurt and harmed so much.
not.
But when the pain of carrying the unforgiveness, which is a massive weapon against yourself while the other person's out living their life, and you
Uh-huh,
recognize that you're only hurting you more than you are hurting the other person. You're really hurting you, and you're the one living with the resentment and the feelings that you have towards them. While they're out living their life, they don't even you're letting them take up an awful lot of real estate in your mind.
uh-huh.
And so forgiveness to me is the ability, and it can take some work, writing a letter that you never send, getting the emotions out of how you feel, but recognizing that hurt people and that they were wounded too, and that they were just projecting out onto you what they felt about themselves or the wound within them. And that, you can decide to go ahead and carry that for the rest of your life and have that bitterness and pain and that weapon that you're turning on yourself, or you can learn to have compassion and recognize that they too are wounded and that forgiveness is not a gift for them. It's not letting them off the hook. It doesn't mean that you even have to have a relationship with them. It's a gift of freedom that you give yourself so that you can
And
go
you're a psychotherapist, so you understand the tools. But
Yes.
then we're left with implementing those tools. And, I had a therapist who would say to me, I am so mad at your sister. Like, sisters just don't do that. And she really had this emotion behind it. And I would look at her and go, thank you for carrying that for me,
Mhm.
because I can't carry it. You know,
Yeah.
I
It's
I
very
have
heavy.
to I have to let it go. You know,
Yeah.
it's life is short. You only have so many days to live. I want to live them as joyfully and as freely as I can. I can't change anything that went on back there. So
No.
why should I carry it around with me? I can't even educate them to behave better, much as
No, because
I'd like to.
Yeah, because we're all on our own journey and everybody has to deal with that inner wounded child themselves. I can't fix your inner child. You're the only one that can. I can give you tools how to do that. I can show
Uh-huh.
you the journey, but you're the one that has to do the work. And so many people, they just aren't either willing or able to turn within and do the work. But, I have found that for my life that I am much more at peace by having forgiven all of those that hurt me. I think the most difficult person that I had to forgive was myself, you
Uh-huh.
know,
Yes.
but I was able to look back at that young girl, she was only 13 years old when she got pregnant. She didn't know what she was doing. She did the
Oh,
best that she knew how.
yeah.
And, she made the best decision that she knew how to at the time. And so to have compassion for that little girl and say, oh, honey,
Yeah.
you were so strong. You did so well to handle all that was heaped upon you at such a young
Yeah.
age. And,
She was
and you,
looking for anyone to help her, just
she
any.
really was. She really
And
was.
she was also under all kinds of myths and misconceptions,
Absolutely.
because somebody tells you they love you and you think they'll be kind to you. And,
Yeah.
you don't have to get very far into life before you realize, wait a minute, the man I was married to, who early on told me he loved me, wanted me dead ultimately.
Uh-huh.
I just couldn't reconcile that. But
Right.
we just have to do the best we can do. And
Hmm.
on the heroine's journey, your number one treasure is your self-worth. And that's what you have
Absolutely.
to hold on to. And
Wow.
all of this was in the work of my self-worth, which I worked very, very, very hard on. I know you too. But
Yeah.
but you light up. Your face lights up. You have joy in your life now. Whereas people who carry resentment and hatred, they look like this.
hmm They do. Well, and you can see that on them so often. It's like they have a mountain they're carrying on their backs, and they don't realize that they've created a prison for their own self, and that they have the keys to set themselves free. And, so often they allow the bitterness and the hate and the, just unforgiveness to really rule their life and drive the bus of their life. And that's not a good bus to be on.
So you're married now, right?
Yes, I actually met my husband when I was 17 years old, thankfully. He's been my greatest hero. And we've been together almost 40 years. And we've built a very beautiful life together. And he's been my greatest cheerleader and my biggest fan. And I'm so grateful to have him in my life. And just a treasure. And so it goes back to what you said in your book about, sometimes things fall apart so that other things can, come into our lives that are so much better for us. And,
Yes.
I write about that also in my book, The Child I Left Behind, which is a beautiful portrayal of what is possible, no matter where you start or no matter what you've been through. It's actually, I love it. It actually complements your book because you write as a self-help book and I write a memoir of my heroine's journey, and they just complement each other. You can just see my story falling right into the theories in your book, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful
What
portrayal.
fascinated me is that as women, we've told stories for years and we never realized they were on a plot line.
Right?
Like you tell
Exactly.
your story, I tell my story, and we get into each other's stories and um, we illuminate them ourselves, but we never really understand that there is a pathway. And that by
And
understanding that pathway, you can understand where you are and where you're going.
and that's what we used to do when we used to sit around the fire,
Yeah.
back in our ancestral times. And women, while men were out hunting and gathering, we sat around and told stories with each other, and we learned from one another's stories, and it was so powerful. And because of the industrial age that we live in and the information age, we are so busy and the world is so distracting that we have forgotten this tradition. And I really would like to invite people to come back to that
Back
beautiful
to it.
sitting in circles and really having that fellowship with women, so that we can get back to the roots of who we are and tell our stories and share our journeys so that we can learn from one another. It's such a powerful tool.
I have to tell you, I've spent my whole life in male circles. And recently I joined a women's networking group. And it's been so interesting because, I've always thought that the male way was the way I was supposed to follow. And so I did that. And at first I was kind of like amazed that this was a group of women who would reach out and be kind and be loving. And I felt good in it. And
Mhm.
it's coming back to that because we need the support. We absolutely
We
need the support.
Absolutely, especially in these turbulent times. We really need to get back and to connect with one another. One of an epidemic that we have in our country, mental health, is anxiety and depression. And, you know, one of the best things in research that they have shown is that back when we were young and back before there were televisions, we used to get outside, we used to interact with our neighbors, we got in the dirt, we had sunshine,
Right.
and we were in a much better place. Even during the Great Depression, the depression rates were so much lower than they are today, where we have so much, but we are confined to these little rooms in front of a screen. We don't have connection with one another, and we don't have sunshine, and we don't get in the dirt. And we really,
I think of my childhood as there was a tree that I loved on the property of the house where I grew up. And I would take a book, and back then I was thinking it was things like Soul on Ice and
Mhm.
Anne Rand. And, I read really interesting things. And I would go sit under that tree for most of the day on the ground.
Yes,
And that's kind of unheard of today, both
yes.
reading and sitting on the ground.
Yes, and the ground is so powerful because it has those negative ions that pull our body in and ground us. It's so healthy for us. They even are selling grounding sheets these days, and we
So
need to be
talk to
outside.
us a little bit about that because I know that that herbs and medicine and nature and all that have been very important to you and your healing. So,
Absolutely. And I
give us a
spend
little understanding of that.
Yes. Oh, well, it's part of nature. That's who we are. We are part of the earth. We are made from the earth. And it's our soul that calls us back there. It just really is just needing us to get back in touch with our roots and getting out in the dirt and the soil and walking barefoot on the ground, being in nature with the trees. They all have a vibrational life force within them. And when we're out there with them, I spend some time in the forest in Northwest Georgia. There's a beautiful place that I go for retreat. And it's just such an amazing place that just comes alive with all of nature. And after being there for a day, you feel like an entirely different person. And I would absolutely prescribe to every person to spend a weekend as often as possible outside in nature, touching the earth, being in the earth, digging in the soil, doing garden, creating a garden, planting flowers. They are our life force. And, we are so much happier, just being with that. It's who
I
we are.
have to admit, I woke up this morning and there's a number of things going on in my life right now that are very challenging. And I woke up honestly feeling depressed, because I was only focusing on that.
Right.
When I look at the totality of my life, there's, and I compare it to like my trip to Ethiopia, where I
Uh-huh.
saw people living under very different, like, come on, Joan. But the first thing I did is I needed to run an errand. So I went over and I sat on the beach for about an hour.
Wow.
And,
Absolutely.
and after that hour, I was much better.
You know what? And isn't that so much better than having to take a pill or sit through hours of therapy? It is therapy. It is what we need to get back to. We need to have that in our life. And, anytime, I'll tell your listeners, anytime you're feeling down, just even if you don't feel like it, go outside and walk barefoot on the ground, on the grass. If you're near the ocean or a river, water is powerful. And just really getting back out with the elements is so important for our mental health.
Yeah. Why was it so important for you to write this book? I had this concern like a week before that I might die before it came out. And because it was legacy and I had to complete this in my lifetime. I get called to these things, maybe you do too, but I had to write this book. It was unavoidable. So how about for you?
Absolutely. And when I started that healing journey 5.5 years ago, that's the first message that I got from God was write your book. You
Yeah,
have
me
to.
too.
And
Yeah.
I could not rest. It got to the place a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I just couldn't sleep. I was not okay. And I finally told my husband, I said, I'm going to the lake. I'm going to be there until this book is written. I don't care if it takes me a year or 5 years. I'm not coming back until it's done. And he was so supportive. He said, whatever you need to write this book. You've been wanting to write this. And I really had been wanting to write this book since I was 16 years old because I had already been through so much, but it just wasn't ready yet, Joan. And so when I went and sat down and wrote that book, I was able to write it in 6 months. And of course, it takes, you've written a book after you get it written, there's a lot to do after that, editing and all of that. But,
Right.
it was powerful. And I'll tell you what, it is the greatest gift that I've given myself. And it's a great gift that I've been able to share with the world. I have women and people calling me and sending me emails and messages of how this book has changed their life. The Child I Left Behind has a spirit about it, and it touches you in a way that illuminates your own story and helps you to see the things that are inside of you that need your love and attention. It's such a beautiful portrayal of the healing journey. And I wrote, it's the child I left behind, a mother's journey toward healing, because I feel like there's always these layers. But as we heal one thing, it helps us to get to those deeper layers. And so if your listeners are looking to find a journey toward healing, this is a beautiful book, The Child I Left Behind.
And you and I should do some stuff together. Because
I'll tell you this, Joe, when I was reading your book, I thought, her and I could go on a tour together. These two books together, they really are a great partnership. And they're both just amazing journeys to the soul. I just
yeah,
love it. I would love to
because
do.
mine teaches you to write your story.
Yes.
And
And and mine helps you to reflect your story and to really look within and see what it is that's really calling your attention. And
uh-huh,
if we would do that, if we would listen to the voice within, read my story and allow yourself to see what's coming up for you, and then take your book and follow the journey through the heroine's journey,
uh-huh.
you have two great tools there that is really going to be a powerhouse for healing.
Because yeah, I encourage people, look around and decide who are the heroines in your life. And
Yes.
you are a heroine in my life. Your
Wow.
story is amazing. You could have chosen to fall on the rocks below and crash. You
Yep.
didn't. There was a pivotal moment where there was a heroine's proclamation inside of you that said, stand and rise. And you listened to it. And while it wasn't tough, you had to develop courage and determination and strength. Nevertheless, you took the heroine's path.
I
And
sure did.
and today, and the same in my life, today, that's the best place to live. That's where
And
joy, prosperity, and freedom lie.
absolutely, Joan. It's the greatest gift that you can give yourself. When we live from our authenticity and from our truth, living from where our soul is guiding us, because we have come here on purpose for a purpose, and we're here for a divine reason. And when we don't follow that, it
Mhm.
it makes us uncomfortable inside. And when we can turn within and find that purpose and really live from our truth, speaking our truth and not hiding behind the shame or the guilt or the doubt or any of those negative emotions, when we can really own our truth and no longer allow anybody else to label us or tell us who we are, we can authentically be who we are. That is when we find peace that passes all understanding.
And you just described the heroine's journey. It's an internal journey to claim your self-worth and your voice. Whereas in the first part of my journey and your journey, when we became unhappy, I was out fighting the lions, tigers, and bears and trying to bring back the bacon. And while I too brought back the bacon, it didn't satisfy me. What
Mhm.
satisfies me is this internal journey, this journey of self, of worth. And the culture doesn't want us to have this journey. And most of the culture sabotages our self-worth. So you have to pick up the mantle yourself. It's a very individual process. And you have to say, we speak the same language. I say, I am a child of God. I
Yes,
was born perfectly. I am meant to live my gifts and my skills. And so, hey, Joan, how do we go do that? And
that's
off,
right.
yeah. So
Yeah, what a
how can
beautiful
people
message.
how can people find you?
So it's AnjaliaMcGoldrick.com. It's Anjalia McGoldrick.com. They can find my book on Amazon.com. It's The Child I Left Behind, A Mother's Journey Toward Healing and Forgiveness.
That's wonderful. And do you have a website?
Yeah, AnjaliaMcGoldrick.com.
Nice, nice. Well, go get her book and read it, and then read mine after hers. So you can find the heroine's journey at heroinesbook.com. Thank you all for being with us. Such a delightful conversation. I so appreciate having you join me. And let's rock it.
All right. Thank you, Joan. You have an amazing evening. Thank
You
you.
too.